This is a presentation regarding Custer State Park and the expanding threat of mountain pine beetle. The mountain pine beetle is a native insect that periodically increases to outbreak proportions, resulting in significant tree mortality. The current Black Hills mountain pine beetle epidemic began in the late 1990s. Until recently, the attacks have been concentrated on the Black Hills National Forest. However, the rapidly expanding population has threatened adjacent forest land, including Custer State Park. Custer State Park is located in the southwestern part of South Dakota. It encompasses more than 70,000 acres, making it one of the largest state parks in the United States. The northwestern corner of the park, which is surrounded by Forest Service land, has been under attack by mountain pine beetle since 2004, as infestations from the surrounding lands spilled over into the park. The mountain pine beetle, despite being the size of a pencil point, is able to attack trees during the summer by mass attack, where thousands of beetles will attack a tree at one time and overcome its defenses. Pine trees produce resin as a defense against the beetle. A healthy tree can pitch out the attacking beetles and prevent them from entering the tree. Healthy trees produce more pitch than stressed trees, and trees with more growing space are healthier. Pines that are stressed, either by drought or competition with surrounding trees, may produce little or no pitch in response to an attack. These trees are very vulnerable to successful attack by the mountain pine beetle. Once inside the tree, the adults mate and lay eggs along the side of the tunnels. After the eggs hatch, the larvae begin tunneling through the nutritious tissue found just beneath the bark, where they'll remain until the following spring before pupating and emerging as adults. Tunneling through this tissue severs the connection between the foliage and the roots, and the tree dies, usually by spring the year following the attack. The beetles usually attack dense stands of trees and expand out from these pockets the following year. This picture shows the beginning of an infestation on Harney Peak. In 2007, there were several large pockets of infested trees just below the peak. These are the discolored treetops seen in the picture. This is a picture taken a year later. Many of the pines killed the year before have dropped their needles, creating a gray landscape as seen in the lower part of this picture. The more recently killed trees have red needles still in the canopy. By this past summer, 2009, the only trees still remaining alive in this view are the spruce. All the pines have been killed by the mountain pine beetle. These appear as gray or reddish tree canopies. As the trees have been killed in the wilderness area, the infestation has begun to spread out, south to Custer State Park and north towards Mount Rushmore. Mountain pine beetle favors larger diameter trees, those more than 8 or 9 inches in diameter, in dense forests. But the current beetle populations are so high in the region that trees as small as 3 inches are being attacked. Unfortunately, conditions continue to be favorable for a major outbreak in the park. The state's response to the developing infestation in Custer State Park involves monitoring, spot baiting in ponderosa pine, anti-aggregation pouches placed on limber pine, and sanitation or salvage of infested trees. Mountain pine beetle has a pheromone communication system. They produce an aggregation pheromone to attract other beetles to a tree for mass attack. They also produce an anti-aggregation pheromone to discourage even more beetles from attacking a tree. A synthetic form of the aggregation pheromone can be used as a bait to draw the beetles to specific trees. These trees are then cut and destroyed. Spot baiting is used to confine and concentrate the attacks in selected ponderosa pine trees. Once the baited trees attracted beetles and became infested, they were marked for removal. Any other infested trees in the surrounding area were also marked for removal. Approximately 20,000 trees were marked for felling in the autumn of 2008. Infested trees are felled and cut into 2-foot lengths and left. As these logs dry, many of the beetles inside die. This treatment results in about 85% mortality of the beetles in the logs, limiting the expansion of the infestation. This is one of the piles of split infested logs. The wood dries and heats up quickly, thereby reducing the survival of any larvae inside the wood. In addition to cutting the trees into logs to dry, pheromone traps lures are placed around the piles to to capture any adults that do emerge from the logs. Another benefit to felling infested trees and cutting them into sections is reduction in long-term fire risk. This picture shows previously infested and now dead trees falling in the wilderness area. The trees jackstraw, increasing the fire risk and also increasing the difficulty for anyone attempting to walk through the area to control the fire. This picture shows jackstrawed piles of fallen pines in the wilderness area. Note that the pile is almost waist high. Contrast this with the felling and cutting of infested trees in Custer State Park. These trees were felled approximately 2 years ago. The brush has now settled and is beginning to decay. Here's a picture of the logs cut several years ago. The fine fuels are gone and the larger log sections are beginning to decay. Managing the beetles already in the park is only part of the solution. We also need to reduce the number entering from the adjacent wilderness area. Population levels are so high in the wilderness area that 100% mortality has already occurred in some stands and more is expected. Mountain pine beetles prefer dense forests where a cool, shaded environment and less turbulent air prevails. A buffer strip of thin forest was created to reduce the migration of the beetles into Custer State Park from the adjacent forest land. This buffer was cut completely around the northwest portion of the park. You can clearly see the difference in the tree density between the park and the adjacent Forest Service land. Not only does the buffer reduce the movement of beetles in the Custer State Park from the adjacent lands, it also provides a safety zone for hikers in the event of a fire, provides a drop zone for getting resources into a fire, and provides a fire break to slow a fire moving into Custer State Park from the dead trees within the wilderness area. While most of our efforts are concentrated on ponderosa pine, the dominant tree in the Black Hills, there are also limber pines. The limber pines and cathedral spires are a relic stand that has received National Natural Landmark status from the National Park Service. Limber pine is a preferred host of the mountain pine beetle. To protect these trees, anti-aggregation pouches to repel the beetles are attached to each tree. The anti-aggregation pouches can be placed on a tree to discourage attack. Currently, this tactic appears to work only on limber pine. The anti-aggregation tactic has been very successful with the loss of only a few limber pines, despite the surrounding ponderosa pines being attacked. The pouches to date have been ineffective on ponderosa pines, but research and trials in the park continue. The tall spruce crowding over the limber pines were thinned to allow more light to improve the growth of the smaller pines. The area was only thinned enough to allow for better growth of the pines, but not for the currants that serve as the alternate host of white pine blister rust, a deadly disease of limber pine. The forests in Custer State Park are managed forests. Between 1980 and 2008, 33,000 acres of commercial harvest occurred and 10,500 acres of non-commercial thinnings occurred. The 1980s to the 1990s, spot baiting and removal of infested trees occurred. By the summer of 2004, current infestations reached measurable levels, and we have intensified our efforts since then. Custer State Park is an important asset to South Dakota. The majority of visitors to the Black Hills come because of the scenic setting, a vista lost if the view becomes stands of dead trees. The trail from Sullivan Lake to Harney Peak is one of the most popular trails in the park. There were more than 13,000 hikers on this trail in 2005. The number has doubled in the last 18 years. Not only are dead, previously infested trees unattractive to hikers, they also present a significant fire risk. The standing dead trees also represent a fall hazard to hikers. This picture shows pines killed by the mountain pine beetle along Harney Peak Trail in the wilderness area. Note that the trees are already beginning to fall. More than 35,000 infested trees have been felled in the baited areas and other infested sites since 2005. This work should continue, as well as baiting along the buffer and thinning dense stands of susceptible trees. These combined tactics will continue to help reduce the mountain pine beetle threat to the park. Thank you.